Welcome to Atlanta Motor Speedway, where the only thing hotter than the Georgia sun are the fireworks of NASCAR racing. The lights have dimmed, but the echoes of tonight's race are still roaring. The NASCAR Cup Series tore up the high banks of this 1.54-mile quad oval, delivering a spectacle of speed, bold moves, and impressive skill. On this super speedway-style beast, drivers battled wheel-to-wheel, drafting through chaos, charging for the win in a race that had it all. Big wrecks and even bigger passes. In this review, we're breaking down every twist, turn, and moment that lit up this Georgia summer's night. So reach up and pull those belts tight. It's time to dive into the NASCAR Cup Series race at Atlanta. Welcome to our Atlanta race review. What a fantastic race this was. We'll get into more of our thoughts about the race as we go, but let's just get into the build for the race. Atlanta Motor Speedway, as it was formerly called, is now known as Echo Park Speedway due to a branding deal they have. It is a 1.54-mile quad oval with 28-degree bankings in the corners, so that's what produces the super speedway style racing as opposed to the old quad oval that we had before the 2022 reconfigure. Today's race was 260 laps, with 60 laps in Stage 1 and 100 laps for Stage 2 and 3. Today's race was on TNT. If you guys caught it, you're aware of that, but they also had an alternate cast to the race called the Alt Cast, and it was on True TV with Jeff Burton and Larry McReynolds. So if that's something you're interested in, that's available during TNT's coverage. A lot of the Amazon Prime crew came over to work on this TNT broadcast, so if you enjoyed the Prime booth and the Prime coverage, this is somewhat similar. It's definitely adjusted for network television, but the core cast is still there. So once again, pretty good coverage. They had like an hour of pre-race, and on True TV, the channel of the alternate cast, they played Days of Thunder before the pre-race, so that was pretty cool. And then I believe there was an hour of post-race too, so pretty good coverage over on TNT and True TV. The in-season bracket challenge begins. We went over that in our race preview, but we can throw up the bracket real quick. I touched on this in my race preview, but starting this in-season bracket challenge at a super speedway style track was a terrible decision, and that'll prove to be true. Let's go ahead and look at our starting order. So in qualifying, Penske swept the top 4 spots. Let's look at our qualifying results. So in first, we have Joey Logano. Second, Josh Berry. Third, Ryan Blaney. And fourth, Austin Cindric. So we have 4 Penske Fords in the top 4. Very impressive that they were able to pull that off. And then in 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th, so the top 8, all Fords. So they definitely had something figured out, something about their setups, but they were able to pull off some impressive speed. But my thoughts going into this, where if they're set up for speed and they're trimmed out, maybe their handling won't be as decent. And the more this Atlanta reconfiguration ages, the more handling is going to matter. The first Atlanta race, it was very packed, tight racing. And each time we go back, the field spreads out more and more and more. So handling is a big deal at this track. Even though it is drafting dominant, you have to be able to hold your line, especially when you get 2, 3, sometimes 4 wide. And then in 9th, we have Alex Bowman, and 10th, we have Chase Briscoe. So that's our first Chevrolet and our first Toyota. And Alex Bowman there, he definitely needed a win, or at least a good points day. So we'll keep an eye on that as we go. So let's just get into our race recap. In Stage 1, Joey Logano led them off. All 4 Penske cars in tow. The field was already starting to get spaced out during that first run than previous Atlanta races. You could definitely tell that handling was affecting them more. And this was going to be more of a momentum and slingshot style race, which really resembles the old style of Talladega and Daytona plate racing, and even before the plates. But it's really entertaining to see them get these massive runs. And one thing that has me thinking about, though, is this is a super entertaining style of racing that we have right now. It isn't what old Atlanta was, but it's not trying to be. You know, the track may look similar, but it races very, very differently. But as the track ages, it's going to get bumpier, it's going to be more handling dominant. Are they going to be able to keep up this current style of racing, and how much longer will they be able to? So that's something that I'm definitely going to be keeping an eye on as we go back to Atlanta over the next few years. The Fords were looking very strong early on. Brad Keselowski was making his moves up into that group of Penske Fords, but every time he would get up to 4th, they would shuffle him back. So he was fighting against a group of 4. So at the same time I was watching the Fords move through the field, on lap 22, Carson Hocevar, they noted on the broadcast, was on the move. He had already gained 21 positions 22 laps into the race. His car was just able to make moves. It was able to cut down the track. And anytime he got a run, he just timed it pretty well. So it was impressive watching him cut through the field. My thoughts at this point in the race was that the high side seemed to be the safer place to be. And that would prove to be correct throughout the race. That's usually the line the leader wanted to stay in. And the way the race shaped out is usually someone would either get a push from behind on the low side. That's the only way they could really pass on the low side. Or they would draft up behind the leader, cut down the track, and then wash up in front of them. But my thoughts were, if I'm going to have to pick a lane to ride in, I probably want to be on the high side, which is counterintuitive to what I would normally want to do, especially at a place like Talladega or Daytona or really any of these super speedway style tracks. When they start wrecking, initially they're going to wash up the track and you'll have nowhere to go except the outside wall. So I would rather have the inside, to dive down across the apron, hit pit road, whatever. But then on the flip side, if you're further back, the cars start washing down the track. So that can also be a dangerous situation. A lot of this just comes down to luck. One thing I noted, and we may touch on this a couple times, but the Hendrick cars will not work together. It's clear that Rick or Jeff, they haven't sat their team down and told them to work together because they don't. And they actively refuse to work together in most situations. So this is soon after lap 22. I'm not sure exactly what lap this was. Larson put William Byron 3 wide for a couple laps. And I just thought this was outlandish to be doing this in the first 30 laps of the race. That's where you're doing it to your teammate, number one. But number two, you're not even halfway through the first stage, and you're jeopardizing everyone in the field by driving like this when he easily could have just pushed Byron, and they both could have continued on. That was frustrating to see, and that continues throughout the race. These Hendrick cars just cannot and will not work together. You see the RFK cars working together. You see the 2311 cars working together. You see the Penske cars working together. But somehow, for whatever reason, these Hendrick cars refuse. So on lap 37, we got a little breather. There was a caution for a rain shower, and David Starr received a free pass. The cars lapped around the track for a little while, but then they eventually pulled them over for a red flag and had to bring out the air dryers. Once they got the air dryers out, they eventually went back to racing. But it was a decent little delay. Luckily, they didn't lose the tracks. They didn't have to do too much work. On lap 49, on the restart, Joey Logano leads them off. And then on lap 58, caution on the speedway. Christopher Bell loses it in front of the field, but luckily most people were able to keep it clean. Austin Dillon got into the back of the 5, then he gets into the side of the 5, and then he spun himself. Ryan Blaney ends up getting the worst of this damage. That was really disappointing because Ryan was a part of that Penske crew, and he definitely had a strong car, and I believe he has one of, if not the highest average finish since 2022. So he definitely was one of the favorites for today's race. Bubba Wallace also received a bit of damage. I believe it was the 20 car that turned down the track and got into his front bumper. So it didn't take Bubba Wallace out, but it did really put a damper on his day. Under yellow, Austin Cindric takes stage 1. So let's look at our stage 1 results. In first, we have Austin Cindric. Second, Brad Keselowski. Third, Joey Logano. Fourth, William Byron. Fifth, Carson Hocevar. Sixth, Ricky Stenhouse Jr. Funny how those two end up together after what they've been through. In 7th, we have Josh Berry. 8th, Bubba Wallace. 9th, Shane Van Gisbergen. And 10th, Chase Elliott. On the Stage 2 restart, Chase Elliott and Chris Buescher lead them off. And then here it comes on lap 69. At the very start of Stage 2, we have the big one. Half the field ends up checking up behind, I believe, Chase Elliott. We'll try to put a little video in there if we can to illustrate the wreck. Denny Hamlin ends up getting into the back of John Hunter Nemechek, and it all breaks loose. Half the field gets involved in this wreck. We'll list the names involved. Denny Hamlin, John Hunter Nemechek, Ross Chastain, Noah Gragson, Joey Logano, Alex Bowman, Josh Berry, Austin Cindric, Daniel Suarez, William Byron, Brad Keselowski, Carson Hocevar, Chase Briscoe, Kyle Larson, Kyle Busch, Justin Haley, Corey LaJoie, BJ McLeod, Ryan Preece, Ty Dillon, Cody Ware. Anyway, it was a massive portion of the field, and this ends up bringing out the second red flag of the race. Many of these cars couldn't continue, so I think there were like 10 cars that were out of the race at a certain point, and probably even more at the end of the race. A lot of people's brackets were absolutely busted. Denny Hamlin was involved. He was a first seed going against a 32nd seed, Ty Dillon. But with Denny Hamlin being out, that's completely busted. Half the other cars being out as well ends up completely destroying everyone's brackets. So we'll see how that plays out. When they were finally able to get it restarted on lap 76, Chris Buescher and Ty Gibbs lead them off. The field gets pretty single-filed out. They calm down a little bit, and at least for a little while. And then on lap 110, Riley Herbst spins and collects Todd Gilliland. Carson Hocevar receives the free pass. Then on lap 118, Alex Bowman and Tyler Reddick end up trading the lead back and forth off the restart. Tyler Reddick holds on and ends up winning Stage 2. Let's look at our Stage 2 results. In first, we have Tyler Reddick. Second, Chase Elliott. Third, Chris Buescher. Fourth, Alex Bowman. Fifth, Eric Jones. Sixth, Ty Dillon. Seventh, Shane Van Gisbergen. Eighth, John Hunter Nemechek. Ninth, Zane Smith. 10th, Brad Keselowski. As a result of the Stage 2 caution, Bubba Wallace receives the free pass. Then to start Stage 3, Chase Elliott and Chris Buescher lead them off. And on lap 176, so I think 16 laps into Stage 3, Shane Van Gisbergen slides through the infield, caution comes out, and Bowman holds the lead. On lap 182, Alex Bowman and Brad Keselowski lead them off. On lap 185, Bubba Wallace spins and brings out the caution. He just ended up getting loose and just went around, but I don't believe there was any additional damage caused, no other cars collected. Just a single car incident. Stenhouse Jr. ends up receiving the free pass. On the restart, Justin Haley and Ty Gibbs lead. And then on lap 196, Eric Jones goes around. I believe it was a similar situation to the Bubba Wallace spin. Ricky Stenhouse Jr. receives the free pass. And at this point, I noted Kyle Busch was up to 15th. I'm not sure exactly where he came in the playoff bubble. We can double check that in a second. At this point, he was like 83 under, so not a huge day for him. The fact that he was able to stay in the race was pretty big and possibly keeps him in the fight to point his way in, even though that will still be difficult. On the downside of this, a lot of the guys that are above Kyle Busch on that playoff bubble also survived the wreck. So not as good as it could have been for Kyle Busch. On the restart, Chase Elliott and Ryan Preece lead them off. On lap 203, David Starr spins and brings out the caution. He just kind of went through the infield. I think he may have had an issue with the toe link, and he ends up out of the race. Michael McDowell gets the free pass, and then on the restart, Chase Elliott and Brad Keselowski lead them off. On lap 277, Ty Dillon gets loose, kind of walks it up the track, and he takes out Justin Haley. And as we have seen throughout this year, that 7 car is cursed. It was cursed with Corey LaJoie, it's cursed with Justin Haley. I think they just need to renumber it. At this point in the race, 36 of 40 cars had been in accidents. That is an insane statistic. Well, I don't think I've ever seen anything like that. Michael McDowell receives the free pass. And on the restart, once again, Brad Keselowski and Chase Elliott lead them off. At this point, I made a note. It clearly looked like Alex Bowman had the best car in the field. He was able to get back to the lead several times on his own without drafting help. And even though he couldn't hold the lead for the whole time, once he got out there, he was able to hold it for a few laps usually. Or if he got past, he was able to cross them over and get back around them. Bowman was looking strong, and Alex Bowman really needed a good points day, especially after that big wreck where half the field was taken out. A lot of the guys that were left in the top 10, top 15, in striking distance of the win, are below the cut line. So if any of those drivers won over Alex Bowman, then it would have moved that cut line even closer and put him in jeopardy. So going back to the Hendrick Motorsports thing, at this point, Kyle Larson was still in the race, but he was fighting towards the tail end of 10th position to 15th, so he wasn't really in the competition for the win. But he still had Chase Elliott up there with him, and they were running next to each other for an extended period of time. And oftentimes throughout the race, they would get side by side, and that would slow them down and allow a third car to come in and pass them both. Super frustrating to see this. They're both Chevy teammates, and they're both Hendrick Motorsports teammates, and they refuse to work together. Maybe every once in a while they would help each other out, but that was more of a happenstance than something that they looked like they planned on doing. Other times, it may be Alex Bowman next to a car from a different manufacturer, and instead of Chase Elliott helping them both pass that outside or inside car, Chase Elliott would just take them 3 wide and end up killing all of their momentum. Once again, super frustrating to see that. I guess they're just going for the win. So in a certain sense, it's not necessarily the worst thing. Towards the end of the race, Alex Bowman ends up pushing Chase Elliott to the front, out ahead of Brad Keselowski, and ends up blocking Brad Keselowski to protect his teammate's lead, and Chase Elliott snaps his losing streak and locks himself into the playoffs. He was the safest driver. I think he was already 12th in points. And even though Alex Bowman didn't win, he had a good race. This is good momentum, and he proved he's a good teammate by making that move. He could have taken Chase and Brad Keselowski 3 wide. Probably wouldn't have worked. He made his decision. I respect him for that decision because we've talked about it. He didn't receive much help throughout the race. So to make that decision at the end was pretty huge. And it may have been a business decision. Not just because, yes, he's my teammate. Yes, he's my manufacturer teammate. Whatever. No. Chase Elliott was the safest person in the playoffs, and he's above Alex Bowman in the points. So as long as Chase won, that cut line doesn't move up, and Alex Bowman's even safer. He has some more insulation before he gets on that playoff bubble. If Brad Keselowski had won, Alex Bowman would have been on the bubble. So maybe a business decision by Alex Bowman, but congrats to Chase Elliott snapping his losing streak. And I believe now that's 3 of the Hendrick cars that have won. So now we're just waiting on Alex Bowman. Let's see if he can get a win this year. The team, it looks like they're starting to turn it around. Alex Bowman looked very strong towards the end part of this race. Let's go ahead and look at the race results. In first, we have Chase Elliott. Second, Brad Keselowski. Brad also had a really good car throughout the race and made his way to the front. Anytime he would get shuffled back somewhat, he usually found his way back to the lead. And what really hurt them at the end here is Chris Buescher and Brad Keselowski were working together throughout much of the race. And I believe maybe somewhere around 20 laps to go, they got separated. That somewhat sealed Brad's fate because he had 2 teammates against just 1 solo Ford. So third, Alex Bowman, good run for him. Fourth, Tyler Reddick in that Superman and Topps trading cards paint scheme. It was a little unfortunate what they did. It wasn't a bad-looking car. But as far as Superman schemes go, I think like Dale Sr. had one, Jeff Gordon had one, Jimmy Johnson had one. This one was kind of weak. I think Jeff Gordon may have actually had 2. But anyway, I digress. Fifth, we have Eric Jones. Sixth, Ricky Stenhouse Jr. Seventh, Zane Smith. Eighth, Ty Dillon. Ninth, Chris Buescher. 10th, Carson Hocevar. 11th, very impressive for this rookie here, Connor Zilic. I don't even think he's officially a rookie, because he's only doing a part-time schedule this year, but very impressive with Connor Zilic. Also impressive for Carson Hocevar to bring a wounded car back to a 10th place finish. Pretty neat. And I didn't mention it, but Ty Dillon finishing 8th. That's pretty impressive because probably everyone that filled out a bracket for the most part, I would say 95% of people at least, probably picked Denny Hamlin to win over Ty Dillon in the bracket challenge. But Ty Dillon not only outlasts Denny Hamlin, he finishes 8th place and really just had the one slight mistake there of taking out Justin Haley. Other than that, he raced a pretty clean race. So another good finish for Ty Dillon, and that's really good for Kaulig. And that's who we're about to mention. AJ Allmendinger also raced for Kaulig, good finish. 13th, we have Cody Ware. Cody Ware actually, he may have finished with the fastest lap. At one point in the race, later in the race, he had the fastest lap. So pretty impressive for Cody Ware. 14th, we had Ty Gibbs, who looked pretty strong earlier in the race. 15th, Ryan Preece. 16th, let's get loud for BJ McLeod. And 17th, we have Kyle Larson. And 18th, Michael McDowell. 19th, Cole Custer. 20th, Austin Dillon. 21st, Kyle Busch. 22nd, Bubba Wallace. 23rd, Justin Haley. 24th, Shane Van Gisbergen. 25th, Noah Gragson. 26th, John Hunter Nemechek. 27th, Todd Gilliland. 28th, Riley Herbst. 29th, David Starr. 30th, Christopher Bell. 31st, Denny Hamlin. 32nd, Josh Berry. 33rd, Ross Chastain. 34th, Daniel Suarez. 35th, Chase Briscoe. 36th, Joey Logano. 37th, William Byron. 38th, Austin Cindric. 39th, Corey LaJoie. And 40th, Ryan Blaney. So towards the tail end there, guys that could have been competitive. Maybe Denny Hamlin, he is pretty good at some super speedways, really just Daytona, but he has a way of working things out. Christopher Bell was a lot of people's favorites to win the whole bracket challenge out of the race. He probably got eliminated in the bracket challenge as well. In 34th, we have Daniel Suarez, who has a pretty decent average finish since 2022 at this track. In 36th, we have the pole sitter Joey Logano. And in 37th, we have William Byron in that beautiful Flames 24 scheme. And it looked like he was going to be competitive. He was up there in the top 5 before that big wreck broke out. In 38th, we have another one of the drivers that looked very strong, Early in the race, we have Austin Cindric, who took stage 1. And in 40th, we had Ryan Blaney, cut down and gone too soon. So a tough race for a lot of the cars. Only 4 survived without being in an accident. And I don't think any of them survived without taking damage. So it was a very tough and hard-fought race. Now that we've seen our results, let's take a look at our playoff bubble. In 13th, we have Tyler Reddick, 128 points to the good. In 14th, we have Chris Buescher, 52 to the good. In 15th, we have Alex Bowman, 39 points to the cut line. In 16th, we have Bubba Wallace, 23 points to the good. And then below the cut line, we have Ryan Preece in 17th, 23 points under. In 18th, we have Eric Jones, 49 points under. In 19th, we have AJ Allmendinger, 59 points under. And in 20th, we have Carson Hocevar, 62 points under. So a very close battle for that playoff bubble. We've now moved from having 11 drivers locked in to having 12 drivers locked in. And that moves Chase Elliott from 12th in the points on the outside looking in to being firmly locked in. Before, he was going to have to point his way in, and he did seem like a safe bet to make it, considering how safe he ran. But you never know when bad luck's going to strike. So now Chase Elliott can focus on the playoffs ahead. And now the pressure's on these bubble drivers as the race for the playoffs continues. Overall, I thought it was a pretty fun race. The worst part for me, honestly, was that big one. Big wrecks are entertaining. It's something that you look for at these super speedway style tracks. But whenever they have these massive wrecks, it takes out a lot of competitive cars. So a lot of the energy, a lot of the excitement around having 40 of these cars going at it, suddenly you now have 15 cars that are competitive, and then maybe 7, 8 others that are on track with damage and just trying to get along. So I was a little worried about that, especially after the big one. It seemed like the energy had died down a little bit, but that didn't last very long. They regrouped, and they got their slingshot passes going. They were crossing each other over, and it was a very fun race, and it was very reminiscent of an older super speedway style race, especially back when Talladega and Daytona were very bumpy. The difference with this track is the turns are much tighter, and it's a very handling-centric track, and it's getting more so. Every time that we go back to Atlanta, there's more of an emphasis on the handling. So that was very fun to see. I hope we see this for the next few years at Atlanta. I would hate for it just to become this single car. I would hate to see it become this single-file line freight train for 260 laps. So hopefully we don't see that, but we'll see how it goes. Overall, I thought it was a really good race. TNT did a fantastic job with their broadcast, with their pre-race, their post-race coverage, and with the alternate cast on True TV. They definitely put some effort into it, and it was nice to see the familiar faces from the Amazon Prime booth. So over the next few weeks, I think we can expect some decent broadcast from TNT and True TV. And to wrap this up, thank you guys for all the support. You guys have been very supportive on these uploads and on our live streams. We've been live streaming different games and mostly NASCAR 2005 Chase for the Cup. So if that's something you're interested in, maybe hit the subscribe button. And if you liked it, leave a like. And if you disliked it, dislike it. And do you have any thoughts, ideas, comments, questions? Leave them down in the comments and I'll try to get back to you. And hopefully I will see you in the next one.